3 months after my marriage ended, I was crying alone at my desk, $800 short on rent, convinced my life was collapsing. I thought that night would break me. Instead, one unexpected conversation changed everything I believed about love, survival, and myself. There are moments in life when you realize just how fragile everything really is. When the carefully constructed world you've built starts to crumble piece by piece and you're left standing in the rubble, wondering how it all fell apart so quickly. That's where I found myself 3 months after my marriage ended. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. One day he was there, and the next he simply wasn't. The divorce papers arrived with the same mundane ceremony as the utility bills, just another envelope demanding something I didn't have the capacity to give. I was 37 years old, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment that always felt too cold, even in summer. The radiator hissed and clanked, but never quite delivered warmth. The refrigerator hummed with mostly empty shelves, and the stack of envelopes on my kitchen counter grew taller each week. Each one a reminder of how quickly financial security can evaporate. I wasn't irresponsible, I need to make that clear. I worked hard, 45 hours a week, as an administrative coordinator at a boutique consulting firm downtown. I arrived early, stayed late, and rarely took lunch breaks. I smiled at clients, organized files with meticulous care, and kept the office running smoothly, while others took credit for the success. But hard work doesn't always equal financial stability, especially when one income suddenly becomes zero and you're left covering expenses that were meant for two. The firm where I worked was small, just 12 employees, including myself. It occupied the 4th floor of an old brownstone building with creaky wooden floors and windows that rattled when the wind picked up. The space had character, as people like to say, which usually meant it was charming but impractical. My desk sat in the main reception area where I could see everyone who came and went. I liked the visibility, the sense of being connected to the pulse of the office. But lately, I'd been staying after hours, working in the quiet emptiness, trying to avoid going home to my own emptiness. Michael Turner was the managing partner, mid-40s, reserved, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He had dark hair touched with silver at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses he wore when reading contracts, and a demeanor that suggested careful control over every aspect of his life. We'd worked together for 3 years, but our interactions were strictly professional. He was polite, respectful, and emotionally distant in that way successful people often are. I knew his coffee order, his schedule, his preferences for meetings and presentations, but I didn't know him. Not really. That changed on a Thursday evening in late September. I'd stayed late finishing quarterly reports, trying to lose myself in spreadsheets and data entry, anything to avoid the anxiety waiting for me at home. The first of the month was approaching, and I was $800 short on rent. $800 might as well have been $8,000. I had no savings left, no credit available, no one to call for help. The weight of it all pressed down on me like physical force. I sat at my desk staring at my bank account balance on my laptop screen, and felt something inside me finally break. The tears came without permission. Quiet, frustrated tears that I tried to hide behind my hands. I didn't hear him approach. Didn't know anyone else was still in the office until his voice cut through my misery. "Vivian." His tone carried genuine concern, which somehow made it worse. "Is everything all right?" I looked up to find Michael standing a few feet away, briefcase in hand, coat draped over his arm. He'd clearly been on his way out, but stopped when he saw me. I wiped my face quickly, forcing my expression into something resembling composure. "I'm fine, just tired. Long day." He didn't buy it. I could see that immediately. Instead of leaving, he set down his briefcase and coat, then leaned against the edge of the nearest desk. Not mine, maintaining a respectful distance. "You've been carrying a heavy load lately," he said. It wasn't a question, and there was no judgment in his voice, just observation. I didn't respond. Couldn't, because if I opened my mouth, I might say things I couldn't take back. Might admit just how close I was to losing everything. Michael was quiet for a moment, then spoke again. "I don't mean to overstep, and you're certainly not obligated to share anything personal, but if there's any way I can help..." He trailed off, leaving the offer hanging in the air between us. Pride is a strange thing. It's what kept me sitting up straight, kept my chin lifted even when everything inside me wanted to collapse. Pride told me to decline politely, to maintain the professional boundary, to handle my problems alone. But desperation is stronger than pride. It's just money, I heard myself say, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Rent, utilities, everything. I'm trying to figure it out, but... I shook my head, unable to finish the sentence. He nodded slowly, processing this information without the pity I dreaded seeing. When he spoke again, his tone was thoughtful. I have a proposition for you, something completely separate from your regular work here. That got my attention. I looked at him directly for the first time since he'd arrived. Amy parents are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary in 6 weeks, he continued. I want to plan something meaningful for them, but I'm hopeless at this sort of thing. Events, decorations, meaningful touches. It's not my strength. He adjusted his glasses, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of uncertainty. You, on the other hand, have exceptional attention to detail and emotional intelligence. But I've watched you organize office events that made people feel genuinely valued. I'd like to hire you privately, separate from your office duties, to help me plan this anniversary celebration. I'll compensate you fairly for your time and expertise. I stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. This wasn't charity disguised as opportunity. It was actual work, something I could do and do well. It was dignity wrapped in kindness. You're serious? I asked completely. I need help. And you need. He paused diplomatically. An additional project. It seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement, something lucid in my chest. Not hope exactly. I'd learned to be cautious with hope. But possibility. The faint suggestion that maybe I could pull myself out of this hole after all. Yes, I said. I'll do it. His smile was small but genuine. Thank you. I think this is going to be something special. I went home that night with a lightness I hadn't felt in months. My apartment was still cold. My bank account still overdrawn, my problems still very real. But for the first time in a long time, I had something to look forward to. A project with purpose, a chance to create something beautiful while earning money I desperately needed. What I didn't know, couldn't have known, was that planning this anniversary would change everything. Not just my financial situation, but the entire trajectory of my life. We started meeting the following Monday evening. Michael suggested we work after regular office hours to avoid any appearance of impropriety or favoritism. I appreciated the consideration even though it meant longer days. Our first session was tentative, both of us feeling out the new dynamic. He'd reserved a small conference room and arrived with a leather-bound notebook, several file folders, and a visible uncertainty about where to begin. Tell me about your parents, I said, pen poised over my own notebook. How they met, what they love, what makes them them. Michael relaxed slightly, settling into his chair. They met in college, both studying architecture. My mother was the only woman in her program, and my father says he fell in love watching her argue with a professor about sustainable design. She won the argument. A smile crossed his face, genuine and unguarded, an expression I'd never seen in 3 years of working together. They started a small architectural firm together after graduating, built it from nothing, lived in a studio apartment for the first 5 years, worked 18-hour days, and somehow still found time to laugh together. Even when I was growing up, watching them work, I could see it. This partnership that went deeper than business. He paused, looking at his hands. I want to give them a celebration that reflects that, something that shows I understand what they built, what they mean to each other. Tell me more, I said softly. What are the small things? Funnings. What makes your mother laugh? What does your father do that no one else notices? And he did. For the next 2 hours, we talked about his parents' quirks and habits, their favorite music and foods, the running jokes only their family understood. I took notes, asked questions, and began to see not just the event we were planning, but the people we were honoring. By the time we finished, I had 3 pages of notes and the beginning of a vision. Over the next week, we fell into a rhythm. Every evening at 6:30, after everyone else had left, we'd meet in that small conference room. The work gave structure to my anxious mind. Instead of going home to stare at bills and worry, I spent hours researching venues, calling caterers, sketching out layout ideas. Michael was different in these private sessions, less formal, more open. He laughed at my terrible jokes. He admitted when he didn't understand something. He trusted my judgment without micromanaging. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, we began to talk about more than just the party. One evening, while reviewing music options, he asked about my divorce. Not prying, just curious in that careful way people have when they genuinely want to know. It wasn't dramatic, I said, surprised by my own willingness to answer. No affairs, no big betrayal. Just two people who stopped being partners and became roommates, then strangers, then nothing. That sounds lonely, he said quietly. It was. Still is. I looked at him. What about you? The office gossip mill says you're perpetually single, he smiled. Or really, the gossip mill is accurate. My last relationship ended because she said I was married to my work. She wasn't wrong. I've always struggled with balance, knowing when to step away from the spreadsheet and actually live. Is that what you want? To find that balance? I think so. But wanting something and knowing how to achieve it are different things. The conversation shifted back to the party, but something had changed. We'd shared small truths, opened small doors, and through those doors light was beginning to seep in. By the third week, we were finishing each other's sentences. He'd mention an idea, and I'd already have it written in my notes. I'd suggest something, and he'd have already researched the vendor. There was an ease between us that felt natural, unforced. One evening, I arrived to find 2 coffee cups on the conference room table, one black, one with cream and sugar. Exactly how I took mine. I thought you might need this, he said, not looking up from his laptop. A late night ahead. Such a small gesture, but it meant everything. It meant he noticed. It meant I wasn't invisible. I caught myself watching him sometimes. The way he rolled up his shirt sleeves when concentrating, revealing forearms that suggested he actually used the gym membership he surely had. The way his expression softened when talking about his parents, the small scar above his left eyebrow that I'd never noticed before. And sometimes when I looked up, I'd find him watching me too. Not inappropriately, just attentively, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to find. Neither of us acknowledged it. We were professionals, adults, people who understood boundaries. But the awareness was there, humming beneath our conversations like a frequency only we could hear. The party planning became my anchor. My financial situation was slowly improving. The generous compensation he insisted on paying helped enormously. But more than that, I had purpose. I was creating something beautiful, something meaningful. For the first time in months, I felt capable, valuable, seen. One Friday evening, as we packed up our materials, Michael paused at the doorway. I look forward to these sessions, he said, not quite meeting my eyes, more than I probably should admit. My heart did something complicated in my chest. Me too, I replied honestly. He nodded, smiled, and left. But that brief exchange stayed with me all weekend, warm and weighted with possibility. The anniversary celebration was scheduled for a Saturday evening in mid-November. We'd booked a historic mansion with gardens, even though the autumn weather meant the gardens would be mostly dormant. Something about the location felt right. Elegant but warm, grand but intimate. The week before the event was controlled chaos. Final confirmations with vendors, last-minute adjustments to the timeline, a minor panic when the florist called to say they couldn't source the specific roses Michael's mother loved. I found them anyway through a boutique greenhouse an hour outside the city and drove there myself to pick them up. Michael noticed everything I did, every extra mile I went, every detail I perfected. His gratitude was evident in the way he looked at me, in the notes he left on my desk thanking me for specific tasks, in the way his entire demeanor had softened over the past month. The day of the celebration arrived with crisp autumn air and brilliant sunshine. I arrived at the venue at 8:50 in the morning, overseeing setup with military precision. The tables were draped in champagne-colored linens. The floral arrangements were exactly right, not too formal, not too casual. The photo display we'd created chronicled 50 years of love in carefully curated images. Michael arrived around noon, watching the transformation with visible emotion. "This is perfect," he said, voice thick. voice thick. "Vian, you've created it," I corrected gently. This was a collaboration. He smiled, and in that smile was everything we hadn't said over the past 6 weeks. Guests began arriving at 6. I stood to the side making sure everything ran smoothly while Michael greeted people. His parents arrived fashionably late, and the look on their faces when they entered the space made every hour of planning worthwhile. His mother, a petite woman with sharp eyes and elegant silver hair, gasped when she saw the recreated wedding cake centerpiece I'd commissioned. His father, tall, distinguished, still holding himself like the architect he'd been, pulled his wife close, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh through tears. Michael found me in that moment, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. No words, just that touch, acknowledging what we'd accomplished together. The evening unfolded beautifully. Toasts were made, stories were shared, laughter filled the space. I watched Michael's parents dance to their wedding song 50 years later, still moving together with practiced grace. Around 9:00, Michael approached the microphone for his toast. I stood near the back, ready to fade into the background like I always did. But he didn't let me. "Tonight is about my parents," he began, his voice steady and clear. "About 50 years of partnership, love, and commitment. About building something that lasts." He paused, his eyes finding me in the crowd. "But it's also about recognizing the people who help us see what matters. The people who remind us that the best things in life come from paying attention to details, to moments, to each other." My breath caught as he continued, still looking directly at me. "This celebration exists because someone taught me that love isn't just about big gestures. It's about showing up every day. About noticing what matters to people, about caring deeply enough to get the details right." The room seemed to fade away. There was only him in those words and the way they wrapped around my heart. "So thank you," he said simply, raising his glass. "To partnerships that last, to love that endures, and to the people who help us become better than we thought we could be." Everyone drank, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The weight of what he just said in front of everyone settled over me like a blanket. Warm and overwhelming and terrifying. I slipped out into the hallway, needing air, needing space to process what had just happened. He followed within moments. "Did I embarrass you?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just needed a moment." We stood there in the hallway, the sound of celebration muted through the walls. He took a step closer. "I've been thinking about what happens when this night ends," he said quietly. "When we don't have the party to plan anymore, when we go back to just being employer and employee." He paused, gathering courage. "And I realized I don't want that. I don't want to go back to barely speaking, to only interacting about work." "You've changed everything for me, Vivian. The way I see my days, my priorities, what I want from life." My heart was racing, but I forced myself to ask the question I needed to answer. "Are you sure this isn't just the momentum of the project, the excitement of creating something together?" "I'm sure," he said without hesitation. Because I felt it before we started this. The first time you made me laugh during a budget meeting, the way you always remembered everyone's birthdays. How you'd stay late to fix problems that weren't your responsibility. I noticed you long before I had an excuse to spend time with you." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing my hand. "I know this is complicated. I'm your boss, and that creates issues we'll have to navigate. But I also know that what I feel for you is real and rare and worth any complication." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw vulnerability I'd never imagined he possessed. Michael Turner, always so controlled and confident, was standing before me, asking for something he couldn't guarantee. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of this, of us, of what it means." "Me too," he said with a small smile. "But I'm more scared of not trying, of looking back and regretting that I let fear win." There in that hallway, with celebration happening on one side and uncertainty on the other, I made a choice. Not out of desperation or financial need or gratitude, but because somewhere in the past 6 weeks, I'd fallen for this man who noticed details, who listened when I spoke, who made me feel valuable in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I stepped closer and kissed him. Gentle, tentative, but certain. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. That rare, genuine smile I'd come to treasure. So we're doing this. But we're doing this, I confirmed, but we do it right. We navigate the complications. We're careful and intentional and honest. I can do that, he said. I can do all of that. We returned to the celebration together, not hiding but not announcing either. Just two people who'd found something unexpected and were brave enough to see where it led. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. Michael and I maintained professional boundaries at work, but we built something real outside those walls. Dinners that turned into long conversations, weekend walks through the city, slow mornings with coffee and the newspaper spread between us. There was no rush, no pressure. We were both old enough to know that the best things take time to build properly. My financial situation continued to improve. The compensation from the anniversary project had cleared my immediate debts. But more importantly, I'd found my confidence again. I asked for a raise at my regular job and got it. I started freelancing on weekends, helping other companies with event planning and administrative consulting. I was building something sustainable, something that didn't depend on anyone else. Michael and I told his parents about us a month after the anniversary. His mother smiled knowingly and said she'd suspected something during the party. His father shook my hand and said anyone who could make his son smile that much was worth knowing. We told the office 3 months later after consulting with HR and ensuring we were following all appropriate protocols. There were raised eyebrows and whispered conversations, but mostly people were supportive. We'd been careful, ethical, and transparent about navigating the power dynamics. 6 months after that first evening when he found me crying at my desk, I was a different person. Not because he'd saved me. I'd saved myself with his support and encouragement, but because I'd remembered what it felt like to be seen, valued, and loved. One spring evening we sat on my apartment balcony. I'd moved to a better place, one with heat that actually worked and a kitchen that wasn't depressing. Michael held my hand, his thumb tracing lazy circles on my palm. "Remember when you asked if I was sure?" he said that night at the party. "I remember. I'm more sure now than I was then. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Vivian. Not because of what you do or how you help, but because of who you are." I leaned my head on his shoulder, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled. I never imagined my life could look like this, that I could feel this way. Neither did I, he admitted. But here we are, here we were indeed. Two people who'd found each other in a moment of crisis and built something lasting from it. Not a rescue, not a fairy tale, but something better. A partnership based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the understanding that the best love doesn't complete you. It reminds you that you were whole all along. Looking back, I realized that my life didn't change because Michael gave me money or opportunities. It changed because he gave me something more valuable. The chance to see myself the way he saw me, capable, valuable, worthy. And that recognition, that witnessing, was the greatest gift anyone could offer. Sometimes I still think about that Thursday evening when everything felt impossible. When I sat at my desk crying over bills I couldn't pay and a future I couldn't see. I think about how close I came to giving up, to accepting that this was just how life would be. I'm grateful I didn't. I'm grateful I let him help. Grateful I took the risk. Grateful I opened my heart to possibility when it would have been easier to stay closed. This is not a story about being rescued by love. It's a story about being reminded by love. Reminded of your own strength, your own worth, your own capacity for joy. It's about finding someone who doesn't fix you because you were never broken. Someone who simply sees you clearly and helps you see yourself the same way. That's what Michael gave me, not salvation, but sight, and in return, I gave him the same gift. The ability to look beyond his spreadsheets and achievements and see the life he'd been too busy to live. Together, we learned that the most profound love isn't about filling empty spaces. It's about having enough trust to show your empty spaces to someone else and let them sit beside you in the emptiness until together you find a way to fill it with something meaningful. 6 months became a year, then 2. We moved in together, combining his sleek downtown loft with my collection of mismatched furniture and plants that somehow survived my black thumb. We planned more events together, friends' weddings, office celebrations, eventually our own small ceremony with just family and close friends. But more than any event, we built daily rituals. Morning coffee on the balcony, evening walks through the neighborhood, weekend projects that usually went hilariously wrong, but always ended in laughter. We learned each other's rhythms, adjusted to each other's quirks, and created a life that felt earned rather than given. Michael taught me that strength doesn't mean handling everything alone, that asking for help isn't weakness but wisdom, that partnership means showing up even when, especially when showing up is hard. I taught him that success measured in achievements means nothing without people to share it with, that vulnerability is the highest form of courage, that love is found in the small moments, the remembered coffee order, the patient listening, the steady presence. Together we learned that sometimes the universe puts people in your path exactly when you need them, not to save you, but to walk beside you while you save yourself. My story isn't unique. Countless people face financial hardship, emotional emptiness, moments of despair where everything feels impossible. But here's what I learned through it all. You're stronger than you think. Your circumstances don't define your worth. And sometimes when you're at your lowest, life has a way of surprising you. Not with rescue or miracles, but with connection. With someone who sees past your struggles to the person underneath, with opportunities disguised as projects, as collaborations, as moments of unexpected kindness. The real shocking truth isn't that I fell in love with my boss. It's that through that love, through being seen and valued and cherished, I finally fell in love with myself again. I remembered who I was beneath the stress and fear and exhaustion. I rediscovered my strength, my creativity, my capacity for joy, and that self-love, that self-recognition was worth more than any paycheck or title or external validation. So to anyone reading this, anyone struggling through their own dark moment, hold on. Not because someone is coming to save you, but because you have the strength to save yourself. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll find someone who reminds you of that strength. Someone who doesn't diminish your light, but helps you see how brightly it was shining all along.